Who am I? I'm John Slaughter. I'm the superintendent for the Southern Campaign of the American Revolutionary War Parks Group. So it barely fits on my business card. I actually had a request. I had to request an exemption to have it all put on there. Because that includes Cowpens National Battlefield. Anybody been to Cowpens? All right. Kings Mountain. Yeah, Kings Mountain National Military Park. Anybody been there? All right. 96 National Historic Site. Cool. And the Over Mountain Victory National Historic Trail. All right. So 4 national park units, every one of them with a different designation. Right? You heard that. National Historic Trail, National Military Park, National Battlefield, National Historic Site. Why is that important? All of the different types of legislation associated with it. Now, part of the National Park Service, our story, our goal is to protect and preserve for future generations those things that are important to our national heritage and those places of beauty of national significance. And so you would think that this Revolutionary War thing would be something that kind of makes sense, right? Well, it does, except that here in South Carolina, most people, when you talk to them, especially if you go back where I'm at, and say, hey, I'm going to a battlefield in South Carolina. What do you think the first thing they think is? Fort Sumter. Yeah, not quite a battlefield, but certainly. But the right war, right? You got the right war. What war do you think they think we're talking about?
War of Northern French.
That is one, yes. So the Civil War, right? Most people think. And yet, how much of the Civil War was actually fought in South Carolina? Not much at all, right? Not much at all. But America doesn't know that. America doesn't know that the American Revolution was really won right here in South Carolina. The 2 key battles. Now, there's over 200 battles and skirmishes in South Carolina. Many of you probably know that. More battles and skirmishes in South Carolina associated with the American Revolutionary War than any other state during the entire conflict. In some cases, it makes up fully 1/3 of the battles of the American Revolution. Why doesn't everybody know that? When you think of the American Revolution, what battles do you think of? What grade are you in? 7, okay. When you think of the American Revolution, what's the battle that comes to mind? Cowpens, because you're awesome, that's why. Because you're awesome. You're part of the 1% of Americans that know that. Most Americans don't know that. Any others? What do you think the most of America would call it? Concord, Lexington, Yorktown, Bunker Hill. You might get Saratoga. People will say Valley Forge. But the reality is, they do that almost in that same order. Concord, Lexington, Yorktown. For the majority of Americans, that's what they think. Concord, Lexington is one end. Yorktown's the other end, right? How did we get to Yorktown? Well, you had to go through South Carolina to get there. The 2 greatest battles of the American Revolution, in my opinion, are Cowpens and Kings Mountain. Now, Rancher's Mill is a great one. That's another great one that is very undertold. But Cowpens and Kings Mountain, they're the battles that were key to spiriting up those people of the backcountry to be able to take up arms ultimately against the king and lead to ultimate victory. Right? If it wasn't for Cowpens and Kings Mountain, there's a real possibility today we'd be speaking with a little bit different accent. Maybe the King's English, right? But Cornwallis, as you may or may not know, came into the South, right? Clinton brought him to the South, said, we're going to begin the Southern strategy. And the reason we started the Southern strategy was because the North was at a stalemate, right? They're kind of trying to figure out, what are we going to do? And so they come to the South and think, well, maybe we can raise an army. We got a lot of loyalists in the South. Maybe we can raise an army, come back up through the bottom of Virginia and attack Washington's armies from the north and from the south. Classic picture, kind of cut them off. The only problem is, the is that when they came into the South, they didn't realize they were dealing with many folks who wanted to be left alone, but certainly folks that didn't want to be told what they could do and where they could do it. And so he split his army. There was really three arms of Cornwallis's army. There was the main body, which was his regular army. Then he had his elite legion, kind of his SEAL Team 6, if you will, that was Bannister Tarleton and his dragoons and his very mobile fighting force. And then he also had, on the other side, he had Patrick Ferguson, who was going through the backcountry and building the loyalist militia, trying to spur up his own spirit of loyalty to the king, right? And he was very, very successful at that. He made a couple of trips through the upstate, through the Midlands. He was very, very successful at that. They raised thousands, but they didn't have quite what they needed yet to really fight. His problem, though, was that he sent word that all these rebels that were, causing all this angst and attacking supply chains and little skirmishes here and there, that he wanted that to end. So he sent word over the mountain and said, if you don't cease what you're doing and lay down your arms, I'm going to come over the mountain, I'm going to burn your farms, and I'm going to hang your leaders. Okay? And the problem is that he said that to people who had already defied the king by settling on that side of the mountain into Indian territory. And they didn't really care. But what they did care about was they cared about their families, and they cared about their religion, and they cared about their sense of freedom. And so the Patriot Movement had already been happening since 1775. It had been happening in the backcountry with the Rutherford expedition and down at 96. The first land battle south of New England happened at 96. A lot of people don't know that. First South Carolinian to give his life for the cause, James Birmingham, was killed at 96 in 1775. November of 1775. When was the Declaration of Independence signed? July 4th. You got it. I know you know it. Right? So almost like 7-8 months earlier than the Declaration of Independence signed, the first South Carolinian had already given his life for the cause in 96. So, a lot of politics happening, right, at the time. A lot of politics happening at the time. Patrick Ferguson ultimately is completely decimated at Kings Mountain. The Over-Mountain men came from the mountains and foothills of Virginia and what's now Tennessee and North Carolina. And they came up from Georgia and South Carolina, and they met Patrick Ferguson at Kings Mountain and completely annihilated the army at Kings Mountain. Okay? All militia. No regular army. All militia. All men long hunters with rifles in hunting frocks and hunting clothes came and brought the fight to the end. Wiped them out. So they basically wiped out the entire left arm of Cornwallis's army in October of 1780. Okay? 4 months later, in January of 1781, Bannister Tarleton is chasing Daniel Morgan. And Bannister Tarleton is, anybody know what his nickname was? What's that? Bloody Band, they called him. Or some people called him the Butcher of Waxhaws, right? He was just, because he had this persona of killing men when they were surrendering, and so Daniel Morgan's moving his forces, knows that Tarleton's coming after him, and chooses the Cowpens to fight. How did he know about the Cowpens? Why was the Cowpens important? Well, the Cowpens was important because guess what? 4 months earlier, when Patrick Ferguson came to battle, or when the Overmountain men came to battle Patrick Ferguson, they stayed at the cow pens the night before Kings Mountain. They were able to kill some cattle. It was like, I call it the KOA campground of the 18th century, right? Because it was an open space and you could see away, so we were a little bit safer there, but especially if it was a large group or an army. So they already knew about the cow pens. And so Daniel Morgan, in what is probably one of the most brilliant military victories of all time, certainly not the American Revolutionary War, was able to complete what's called the double development, or pincer movement, which is really the ultimate goal of most infantry and cavalry attacks, is to be able to fold in your flanks on your enemy, completely surround them and wipe them out. Daniel Morgan was able to accomplish that. The only time in the American Revolution, only a handful of other times in all of the history of military battles was that accomplished. And Hannibal did it back in, was that 300 BC or 300? And so now Cornwallis has lost his left arm and his right arm, but only has his main arm. So he's mad. He's mad. He's gonna fix this. He's gonna chase Daniel Morgan to Greensboro, North Carolina, to the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. And at Guilford Courthouse, it was actually a loss to the Americans, the Patriots. However, the loss to the Patriots, we were able to leave the field without having our army captured. And the loss to the British was so extensive that they lost nearly 50% of their entire army, that even Clinton said, another win like this and we're done for, right? And so then Cornwallis had to kind of, lick his wounds, get to a place where he could try to heal his army and come up with another strategy, because there wasn't a whole lot of left. Time was running out. And so he went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and then ultimately made the choice to go to Yorktown. When he got to Yorktown, shortly after he got there, while he was heading to Yorktown, our great longtime friends, the French, decided that they were going to finally enter the war. Just the right time to help us secure the ultimate victory. Okay? So, the discussion, that's just the kind of, why isn't the Southern Campaign of the American Revolution told in the history books? Any ideas on that? I mean, that's pretty significant, right? Within a year of Kings Mountain, the war's over. It'd been going on for 6 years before that. Why do you think that? I mean, why do you think it's not told? Americans don't know.
South Carolina, very and his men were heroes of the revolution in this state.
More presidential and congressional medals handed out for the battles in South Carolina than any other state. 3 of them alone for the Battle of Kings Mountain. Battle of Calvert. So, excellent point. But why? So, all this national recognition at the time, why?
I think the battles weren't as big, and maybe they weren't as pivotal, and maybe the pivot from beginning to end, it wasn't as not as well understood.
So Clinton himself said that the Battle at Kings Mountain was the beginning of the end for the British. He said it was the first link in a chain of events that led to their ultimate loss. So even the British recognized that what happened in the South was huge.
And I don't want American history teachers don't do it.
Good idea. I love it. That's where I want to get. I don't know.
Have you ever read the account?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you out of this ear. I'm deaf in this one.
Read the account of the young man that the militia at Kings Mountain sent to the Congress to tell them
that they had won, right?
7'1".
Yeah,
Except that when he busted in, the Congress was in session.
yeah.
Washington was sitting there, and he looked at it. Of course, the man told him they had won Kings Mountain. He said, no wonder they won the soldiers like
The
that.
soldiers like you. When the average soldier was actually 5'5", right? And this guy's 7'1". They did it on purpose. Any ideas? So, I'll tell you this. Up until 1850, the history books of 1850 and before, history books came out about very, very expensive to print. Couldn't get a whole lot of them out. They came out about every 10 to 20 years, really after significant events, that there needed to be some kind of update. 1850, it's all in there. You find it in most history books that Cowpens and Kings Mountain were in. They were the pivotal places in the American Revolution, right? The next history books you start to look at are about 1870. It's gone.
So punishment for Fort
It's
Sumter.
completely eliminated from the history books. What was that?
Punishment for Fort Sumter.
Okay. So, Fort Sumter. What happened in Fort Sumter?
It was the war.
Beginning of the Civil War, right? South Carolina began the Civil War, right? So, it's a theory. It's hard to prove because nobody's taking notes when, those conversations are happening in Congress, right? But it's certainly, as you look at the history books, it took almost to the 1920s for the stories to start to resurface again. And why do you think that was? Because there was finally families that were angry enough that their Revolutionary War ancestors weren't getting their pensions, and that they weren't able to, they were having to fight for the land that they were given for fighting in the American Revolutionary War, that it started to come to light again. Okay? All right? So, African Americans in the, let's say, they would have been African Americans either way. Whether they were British loyalists or whether they were patriots. Why would they fight on the side of the patriots? If the British had promised them their freedom, if they would fight for the British, why would they ever fight for the patriots? I think it's a simple answer. I think we make it a lot bigger and deeper than it really needs to be.
They didn't win.
Could be. Maybe they thought that was the best chance for a win. I think a lot of it just came down to where were their loyalties. Who were you loyal to? Why would people choose to fight for the British whether you were white or black? Because you were loyal. You were loyal to the king. You were loyal to your family. You were loyal to your church. Right?
There's documentation that states that Francis Perry, at least half of his band were African Americans, because he intentionally recruited them because they knew how to get through the swamps of South Carolina.
Well, and I think there was a lot of, at that time, as our nation was forming at that time, a lot of the discussions that happened later, especially discussions around whether slavery was legal or not, weren't happening at that time because it wasn't an issue. It was about building a new nation. And we go through these cycles, right? Whenever leadership changes in our nation, we go through these cycles of sometimes very difficult and conflict-induced dialogue. So some of that was happening at the same time. Now, what I can say is that the ratio of African Americans who decided to fight for the British versus fighting for the Patriots was a lot higher because there was a much greater reward for the British one, right? That was tangible to it. And so, I don't know if any of you had a chance to meet Joel, one of our interns this year at Cowpens, but he created this character from historical context. He called him Scipio. And Scipio was a loyalist. And Scipio had been promised his freedom, so he decided to fight for the British. And what did that mean? What battles was he at? And what did he do when it was looking bad for the British? Does anybody know where most of the British loyalists, African Americans went after the American Revolution? Any ideas? They went somewhere, right? Where? Siberia? Oh, Liberia. I was like, Siberia? How the heck did they get there? That was awesome. No. The Britain? No. Actually, many of them, many came that were in South Carolina at the time. There was a natural.
What about Canada?
Okay, Canada, close. Yeah, I guess it is kind of Canada. Nova Scotia.
That's Canada.
Nova Scotia. Yeah.
That's part of Canada.
You go ask them if they're Canadians. And so up the eastern seaboard, really, and then into Nova Scotia. And to this day, there is such an incredible sense of loyalty to that ancestry and what those individuals did to try to secure freedom for their families and really for their struggle at that time. It's an incredible place. And so Joel tells that story of Scipio, and he actually was able to created this character, and he was actually able to go to Nova Scotia about a month ago and share this character, this story, developed right here in South Carolina. So he took part of the story of South Carolina with him. Now, another cool fact is last year at Kings Mountain, we dedicated on the mountain at Kings Mountain a marker from the Daughters of the American Revolution that recognized and honored three that we know for a fact, African American patriots who fought at the Battle of Kings Mountain. And very interesting, very different stories. Two of them were freemen, and one of them was a slave. However, we know that at the Battle of Kings Mountain, that there was probably about 100 men that fought between the two sides that were of African Americans. Pretty incredible. We don't tell that story anywhere. Like you got the American Revolution, and for some reason there's no African Americans at that point in time in this continent. What? Really? How do we have a hard enough time making this history relevant just based on the battles and the significance of the military issues, And then we have these other issues that just fall to the wayside. So who we are as a nation is really the coolest thing about telling the story of the American Revolution to me is that it's all new. 235 years old new is what it is. We get to rediscover it. We get to share it. We get to uncover it. We get to unwrap it, unpackage it in a different way than we've ever been able to do before. So what I'm going to show you tonight, because I've been talking for a long time here, is I'm going to show you some ways that we're trying to get this word out to America. We're starting here in South Carolina. We partnered with South Carolina Educational Television and the Sons of the American Revolution to develop some short videos that try to tell some of the stories, some of the battles. We picked 5 or 6, but then we added a couple more. The one I'm going to show you right now is the battle of at Brattonsville, Huck's defeat. Does anybody know where Brattonsville is? Have you been to Brattonsville? You gotta go. It's so fun. It's so fun. Has anybody been there? It's a very cool site. You've never been there, have you? I didn't think you had. And the story of Huck's defeat is one of those stories that's really kind of, this was really, the battle in South Carolina was our first Civil War. It was literally brother against brother. It was the loyalists against these rebels and this new patriot, right? It was the first Civil War. It was also brutal and bloody. There was no love lost. Many brutalities on both sides occurred during the battles in South Carolina. So the Battle of Brattonville, we're going to show you how what we've developed is we've developed these videos, a video series, 8 videos, where we, it's on the Know It All platform, which is accessible to every classroom in all of South Carolina. It's really accessible to every classroom in the United States. And it also comes with, we have curriculum that teachers can download, we have lesson plans that make it easy to teach at various grade levels, to try to teach these stories, not only of the American Revolution, but also, the first one I'm showing you is going to kind of an introduction into what we're doing with these videos. This project is going to bring to the classroom across the nation the story of the Southern campaign of the American Revolution. Places like Waxhaws in South Carolina. And then we talk about Brattonville and Huck's defeat. And then we head back down to Camden where, this incredible defeat that happened at Camden. And most of the people at that time would have thought that the war was over because the majority of the Southern Army was defeated there. But then you turn around and you have this incredible little victory atmosphere, it kind of sparked the spirit that continued on to places like Kings Mountain, drawing the open, all up and down after the Appalachian Trail, and then that spirit carrying over to the Battle of Cowpens, and what happened, that ultimate victory and defeat at Cowpens that really led to the ability to head into Guilford Courthouse. So, part of the deal. And fend off the largest army in the world. So, this is buffering on my phone right now. Normally I have Wi-Fi, this is buffering on my phone. So my apologies for that. So you get the idea? That was basically the talk that I just gave you guys for the last 20 minutes is what's covered there. But we go through these various battles, and we talk about what it means. But really important is, it's really easy for, how is history told in America? But especially war history, how is it told in America? Who's usually telling it?
The one that wins the war.
I'm sorry, I
said the one that wins the war.
Oh yeah, no, that's how it's told. Yeah, that's how the story's formed. But normally, in our nation, who's telling? When you think you're going to watch a historical documentary, who's telling it? What's that? Some old dude. Some old dude, always. Some old dude, right? And it's like somebody that's just got this intense knowledge about every detail, about every person and every movement and every weapon, that's like, and before you know it, you're falling asleep. Not like you were a few minutes ago when I was talking, right? And so one of the things we did was we put together a youth engagement committee to figure out how do we do this. We're going to try to get this in the classroom. How do we do this in a way that's going to, people are going to get it? That the audience we're trying to reach is going to get it. And so we hired a couple of youth to be our narrators in these. And so there's 2 young people that are kind of telling the stories. And you'll see, I really hope this comes off because if it doesn't, I'm going to give you the website you got. I'm going to give you a little homework. Y'all can go home and check it out. So the cool thing about the way that we did these is generally about 4th grade, which is where it's taught, starts to be taught, all the way up through college it can be used. And it just depends on what you're willing to take out of it. And you'll see some of the stuff that pops up and gives you a little bit of information about this and that here and there. But the curriculum and the lesson plans are for the various different grades. And it meets all of the standards for South Carolina. So let me see if this is going to show. And if it doesn't, I just really apologize. Normally I have the like I said, some kind of connection.
After the crushing defeat at Waxhaws, the people of the South Carolina backcountry had a decision to make. Were they Tories, loyal to the crown, or would they become Whigs or partisans and fight the British invaders? General Thomas Sumter was raising South Carolina militia troops. Generals Francis Marion and Andrew Pickens would organize brigades later in the year. Militia units consisted of civilian farmers, sometimes supplemented by Catawba Indians and slaves. Less formal groups of partisans assembled whenever a regional threat appeared. There were also loyalist militias. In this conflict, neighbors were fighting against neighbors, in some cases against former friends or members of their own family.
I am a rebel. My brothers are rebels and our dog is a rebel too. If you go with the British Army, you may stay with them, for I can no longer be your wife. Isabella Ferguson.
In this part of the country, and I think it was true throughout almost the whole colonies, the rule of thumb was that 1/3 of the people were for the rebellion, 1/3 of the people were for the loyalists to the crown, and the other third wished to remain neutral through the entire event. Just leave us alone, let us live our lives, and we'll stay out of the fight. Unfortunately, that wasn't always possible.
Nothing will serve these people but fire and sword. Bannister Charlton.
The American militia and partisans couldn't just line up and take on the British. The British forces were too well trained and disciplined for that. The Americans had to whittle away at the enemy, strike their supply lines, fight dozens of little battles, rather than one big battle. This strategy amounted to what would come to be known as guerrilla warfare.
Being in the militia is a day-to-day activity. If you're a farmer and you heard the militia call, then basically what you did was you got your musket or rifle together and whatever necessaries you were able to take with you, and you might not be coming back for a while.
In June 1780, the British had established an outpost at Rocky Mount in the Catawba Valley. Lieutenant Colonel George Turnbull sent troops into what are now York and Chester counties to round up and eliminate the rebels. This mixture of loyalist volunteers, called provincials, and British Legion was led by Captain Christian Huck, a loyalist from Philadelphia.
Huck came to the South Carolina backcountry with a pretty bad attitude about the Whigs or the Patriots in general, and he particularly did not like the Scotch Irish Presbyterians here. He was reported to be a very profane man. He was, in spite of his name, not very religious. He frequently blasphemed and took the Lord's name in vain, which did not endear him to the people here. He did this while he was confiscating their horses and their cows and all their food, and arresting some of the leaders. And if they were rebels, he might even burn their plantation house or burn their crops.
What's on his way? What's on his way?
That's all. Take this message to my husband. In the community of Brattonsville, Martha Bratton sent a message to warn her husband, Colonel William Bratton, that Huck was on his way. Bratton was on the other side of the Catawba River in General Thomas Sumter's camp. The message was delivered by Watt, the family's African-American slave.
As late as 1790, most of the people who owned an enslaved person in the backcountry owned only one enslaved person. You would probably have the white family actually doing the same kind of labor. They might all even be living in the same physical space in the same household. But an enslaved person would certainly know that they didn't have the freedom to come and go as the person who owned them did. So it wouldn't be a relationship where one felt like an equal. If you look at the debates during the Continental Congress, you often have these white congressmen saying that King George is trying to reduce us to slavery. And so it's clear that they presume that there is something wrong about depriving somebody of their liberties, and they equate depriving people of their liberties with slavery. People in South Carolina did not believe that the liberties and freedoms for which they were contending for themselves were liberties and freedoms that people of African American descent were entitled to.
In many places, slaves were offered freedom if they agreed to fight for the British.
Certainly, large numbers of slaves deserted their plantations, particularly in the low country. But as far as the backcountry here goes, in many cases, it's clear that they felt like their loyalty was to the family that owned them.
Carl Bratton, come out and get in the crowd.
Help you, sir?
Where's your husband?
It's not here. Huck's advance guard arrived in Brattonville on July 11th.
I told you I don't know where my husband is.
Later that day, Captain Huck arrived.
So Huck interrogated Mrs. Bratton. He tried to get her to intercede with her husband to get him to join the Loyalist militia. She absolutely refused, and this infuriated Captain Huck.
I would rather see my husband die in Sumter's army, true to his country and cause, than have him live a traitor in yours.
Huck spent the night at the neighboring Williamson plantation, lambasting the Patriots and praising the accomplishments of the British Army and his loyalist troops.
We have driven the regulars out of the country, and I swear that even if it rained militia from the heavens, I would not harm you.
The Whigs had picked up Huck's trail and had followed him up this way, and they arrived in this neighborhood about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. They divided their troops, with one group attacking from the west and one group attacking from the east, and they basically cut off any avenue of escape. And just as the sun began to appear over the horizon about 5:30 in the morning, they launched their attack. And it was a complete surprise for the British and the Loyalist troops. The Loyalist resistance ended pretty quickly. The New York Volunteers surrendered. The British Legion began taking casualties. And at that point, as they fled the battlefield, some of the riflemen took aim, and Captain Huck went down with 2 bullets in the back of his head.
The Battle of Huck's defeat was over, a partisan victory that spirited up morale in the backcountry. This was the first time that the Patriot militia engaged not only Loyalist militia, but also the British Legion, some of them the men accused of massacring the Americans at Waxhaws. Choosing sides became a little easier. After Huck's defeat, new volunteers increased the ranks of Sumter's militia brigade and others.
We got one, boys! Woo!
That country was locked and loaded, ready to fight.
Pretty cool, right? A little bit different way of telling it. But all the other episodes are very similar like that. They show some graphics. They've got, the youth narrators. There's, like I said, we've got a young man and a young lady kind of telling the stories. We were able to incorporate the old guys, right? Well, because they really ultimately have the knowledge, most of it is that. But a lot of instruction on the front end about, hey, tell us something kind of cool, and let's keep it moving, and I think for the most part, we did a pretty good job of that. I heard you're going to be signing autographs a little later, right? Did you all see him in there at the end when I was pointing? So we used a lot of the local reenactors and a lot of people. We traveled all over the state and up into North Carolina as well to do a lot of this filming. And it's really, last year, we released it, I want to say we finally got it out. It was late, it was October or something. But this year we did some teacher workshops this summer. So this is going to get into the classrooms this year. We're looking at bringing some more funding to the classrooms to be able to get people there and bring some reenactors maybe to the classrooms to help tell the story and spread it out. So it's not just the guy in green and gray, tell the story. So if you want to go to, just go to, you can go to knowitall.org, knowitall.org. It's a great place to find it. You'll find a lot of other really cool information there about it. But I really wanted to kind of show you that because I think that particular Brattonsville, is one of the areas where we tried to touch a little bit on the African American contributions to the war, what some of the realities of that were. What were we thinking about it? What were the considerations, for those people that were making those decisions, choosing sides at that particular point in time.
You're going to be making available for sale at the Parker?
We haven't really talked about that too much. I imagine it's free right now, so I'm like, I kind of wanted it to be something that we give away. I guess if people want to buy it, we'll probably figure out a way to package it up themselves. They have to do that. But yeah, it's really a cool free tool to be able to get that word out about the American Revolution. Cowpens is in there, Kings Mountain is in there. 96 we use as a nice little bookend. Waxhaws, Camden, Musgrove Mill, Battle of Guilford Courthouse. So kind of some of the key places that help bring it together. One of the other things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get these communities that have these battlefields, in their communities to own it as an economic engine for their community, right? To help spawn tourism and other opportunities to promote their community as part of the Southern Campaign of the American Revolution. There's these whole Revolutionary War trails up in the Northeast that people go up there and spend a week traveling around to these different sites to go stand on a place where there's nothing. Maybe a marker and that's it. So there's a great opportunity right now to, within the state to also encourage economic development and tourism in the state. So we're encouraging small communities that have these sites. Get with your Visitor and Convention Bureau. Get with your Chamber of Commerce. Get with the National Park Service. We'll help figure out how to get one of these made for your battle too. Because that's what it's all about. It's about owning the history that's in your backyard. That's what it's really all about. Any questions? Comments? Yes, sir.
I'm still trying to piece together how Nova Scotia ended up being a choice. Was it really more of a flight?
Yes.
And not a migration. It was to save their life for the threatened?
It was a flight. It wasn't only, there was a lot of British that went to Canada, and not as many went to Nova Scotia, but there was a lot that went to Canada because they did want to leave because they were losing everything. Their land grants, their royal land grants were being taken from them. Many of them were being hung. So it was just. It was a massive movement.
When you
Place to
consider,
go where they were safe was more.
when you consider transportation back then, it was actually much easier to go by boat than by land.
Yeah.
And so Nova Scotia and Halifax in Nova Scotia was already a fairly decent sized city for that time. And so a lot of people coming out of Philadelphia, New York especially, were headed that way. And then when they started losing battles here, those folks cascaded up towards that area, and it was easier to go by boat than it was by overland. There was on 4th of July, so there's an AHC channel on Charter, and 4th of July week, they had two different series on the American Revolution. One that's narrated by Charles Perrault, and the other one was, I don't remember who did it, but it was about young people and the 15 and 16-year-olds and how they helped the cause for the revolution.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought it was both very interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing about that is that one of George Washington's best guys was a black valet, Cornwallis. And the way that they had that division was that this valet was completely discounted. And so they would say anything they wanted to in front of him, and he was passing secrets and plans like nobody's business because they pretty much thought he was part of the wallpaper. And he was one of the reasons that George Washington had the information he had to be able to lay siege to Yorktown.
Well, it's really interesting, socioeconomic side of, side of what, how African Americans were thought of at that particular time. that is exactly it. It was kind of like, you know, it was almost like it was just not even much thought. You know, it was either you were going to fight on that side, or you were going to fight on our side, one of two. There was no real neutrality. You know, even in the 1840s and 1850s, you know, a lot of people think 1863 came around, and that's when all hell broke loose, right? That's when, you know, the Civil War happened. You know, they don't realize, a lot of people don't realize it was, you know, it was literally 30 years in the making. You know, a lot of discussions, and there's one incident at the Battle of Cowpens when Tarleton, you know, lost his army, and he's riding off down the Green River Road, and William Washington and the dragoons of the Patriot forces chasing after him, and they get into a saber engagement, you know, down at the end of the Green River Road, and William Washington goes to strike with his saber, and his saber's parried by Bannister Tarleton. His saber breaks off at the hilt, so he's defenseless. And just about at the time that he's going to get struck by one of Tarleton's officers with his saber, it says, the accounts say that his servant pulled out his pistol and shot the horse out from under the guy that was about to strike him. And William Rainey, who paints this incredible picture that's at the State House of that battle, of that scene, depicts the servant as black, right? And yet, there's no indication that there was any such position, and that it was really probably the bugler or one of it, maybe his aide-de-camp, maybe his right-hand man, that would not have been an officer. And so, even though this painting is painted in the 1840s, you can see the progression of where our nation was going at that time, and that the dialogue and even the art of the time was starting to open up these topics that people didn't want to consider. And what better way than to validate the humanity of an individual that had put them in a painting forever, showing that they're saving the life of one of our national heroes, right? Very, very cool. Just it's incredible. Like I said, there's so many facets to our history and what it is to us, what it means to us today, and how it's really relevant today that we need to kind of grab onto and share it with folks.
You know, I've always thought it was quite ironic that Francis Marion in the state, people in the state, look at him as being the South Carolina's general that really forced one lost out of Charleston in that area, sure. But what was always fascinating to me that it was known that Marion had a lot of African Americans in his group. And as I mentioned before, the reason he did was because he knew the swamps and how to navigate those swamps. But none of the African American names of his men have ever been known.
Well, it's very hard. I mean, just in our historical research to try to figure out who some of the African Americans were that fought for, you know, for William Campbell or for John Sevier, you know, some of those at Kings Mountain. Very, very hard to track that through history and track those names down. And yet, there's plenty of accounts of, you know, somebody's life being saved, you know, by, you know, their best friend who's African American.
These African American patriots that rode and married the patriots of the state should be somebody.
Yeah, well, again, right? It's part of the story. It's just one more facet of the story that makes it such an incredible part of our history and so relevant to us today. You know, yes, sir.
So this time frame you're talking about, 1850, 60?
You mean the painting?
Just this time that we just talked about, the war that we just talked about, the battle.
No, this is 1780.
1780. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Perfectly okay. 1780 to 1781. Okay, and that's when really the majority of the battles happened. Now, like I said, there was a few things here and there, up until then, but the majority of the battles happened between 1780 and 1781.
And there's one point I want to make about African Americans and history. So I did this search on my ancestry, and it was beautiful, all the way back to 1870, and it just gone. I couldn't find. I spent so much time and money to get past that, and my trail was lost.
Isn't that frustrating?
Yes.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. But okay, so think of a historian telling the story of the American Revolution versus the story of the Civil War. The Civil War, everybody so many more people were literate. They were writing, they were photographing, right? There's photography even, and the diaries and the documentation is just so intense that you can reconstruct just about every battle of the Civil War. But then you go to the War of 1812 and it starts to get a little bit sketchier, right? The stories aren't quite as comprehensive. And you get to the American Revolution, and when you're talking about folks in the back country of South Carolina who couldn't read, couldn't write, it's nearly impossible when they're trying to recollect. Some of them not even first account primary sources, but their widows, what their story of participation was in the American Revolution. It just makes it so hard, which is why the sciences, archaeology and so many of the new STEM, aspects of reaching back in the past with ground penetrating radar, 3D imaging, stuff like that helps us uncover archaeology in a different way. We can tell now, you go in and you do a metal detecting on a battlefield, and you pull up 2 musket balls that look the same, have been in the ground the exact same amount of time. We can now take those 2 musket balls and put them through a process that tells us whether that musket ball was a high probability of belonging to a British soldier or a high probability of belonging to a Patriot soldier. And then we can also tell you probably where it came from. So we could even track then where those soldiers might have been before they got to the Battle of Alabama. So science is so awesome. And now we've got this mashing up of history and science in a way that we've never had in our nation before that just kind of unwraps it in this very cool way.
Is Gillespie Gap on NPS site?
I'm sorry.
Is Gillespie Gap on NPS site?
Gillespie Gap in North Carolina?
Yeah.
Gillespie Gap is on the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is it an NPS site?
Well, the Blue Ridge Parkway is.
Yeah. Well, they have events up there once in a while. That's where the old mountain people came.
Yeah. Yeah, the Mineral Museum.
Yeah.
So, actually, I believe it's September 15th, 16th, 17th. They'll do something up there at the Mineral Museum and the Alpha Pass Orchard. I'm also, I told you I'm the group superintendent for the Southern Campaign American Revolution. Right now, I'm also the superintendent for the Blue Ridge Parkway. So I'm spending most of my time up in Asheville, which is where I came from today.
I was thinking that's where the old mountain people came.
They came through Gillespie Gap from Watauga. They came over the Yellow Mountain Gap, which some people will say is the highest point of the American Revolution.
Was that part of the old mountain victory trail?
Yes, it is. It is. Right there at Gillespie Gap, at the Mineral Museum on the Blue Ridge Parkway, is where the Over Mountain Victory Trail crosses. It goes down Yellow Mountain Gap, is basically what it does. So the Over Mountain Victory National Historic Trail starts in Abingdon, Virginia, and it also starts in Elkin, North Carolina. And they come down and they meet in Morganton at Quaker Meadows. And there at Quaker Meadows is where they form the main body of their army, and then they head south down towards, we're actually going to go to 96. And they got word that Ferguson was actually at Kings Mountain. So they said that he was on his way to Charlotte at the time. They wanted to cut him off before he got to Charlotte, because guess who else was in Charlotte? Exactly, Cornwallis. If he had gotten to Charlotte, it might have turned out a whole different way. All of those men that came, those 2,000 men that came from over the mountain, may have probably been wiped out. And that very well could have ended the war. So they ended up coming down to Cowpens, came through like what's modern day Rutherfordton, and then down really through where Chesney is now, and over to Cowpens, and through Gaffney and Blacksburg on up to Kings Mountain. So yeah.
The state of Tennessee claims that.
Well, they should, some of them, not all of them. They should. They've got some very cool artifacts at the State Museum, I'll tell you. They got little sweet lips, which was a rifle that supposedly shot Patrick Ferguson. And they got that, sweet lips they call it. And they've got that there. They've got the sword, that was surrendered to Johnsonville at the time. So yeah, they got some very cool artifacts. But yeah, I mean they own it. They own it because Sycamore Shoals is up there in Elizabethton, Tennessee. And if you ever get a chance to go up for that, I think that's usually on the 25th of September. You go up to Sycamore Shoals State Park in Tennessee, Elizabethton, Tennessee. It's really only from here, it's probably a 2.5-hour drive. And they do a crossing of the Watauga, where the Over Mountain men in their attire recreate the crossing of the river. And it's a wide river. It's like as wide as a broad river. They cross the river and come up and then tell the story of the Over Mountain. And then, if you really want to hear a great story, come to Cowpens on October 6th, the night before Kings Mountain. This year it's on a Friday, so the perfect time. October 6th at Cowpens National Battlefield. And the Over Mountain men will be there, and the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association, and they'll do a reenactment of first-person storytelling, where they tell the story of the Over Mountain men and their trek to come battle Patrick Ferguson as if they are one of the characters that did it. It's very, very cool. And then the day after that, October 7th, we have a huge event that memorializes the Battle of Kings Mountain. It's on a Saturday, and it's at Kings Mountain.
Kings Mountain's having something tomorrow, right?
Kings Mountain has some tomorrow? I don't know, probably will. Yeah.
It's a small thing, I think it is.
What's that?
I don't think it's that big,
Yeah, we have things all the time. If you go on any of our websites, or you go on our Facebook pages, we have Facebook pages for each of the sites, you can get all the information. We give updates all the time about the different things that are happening. How many of you are on Facebook? You're not on Facebook, are you? Did you even have one of those crazy devices? No? Yeah. Yeah. Are you allowed to get on social media?
Good job.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So, if you were, you wouldn't raise your hand anyway, because there's only old people on Facebook now. but yeah. So you can go on there and you can get. If you guys are on Facebook, I'm sorry, we're not older than you anyway. Yeah, you can get all the information, all the different events we have going on, and it's always a lot of fun. This year, October 6th and 7th, we're doing a lot. Gaffney's putting on a big thing. They got the Humanities Council to get them a big grant, so they're doing a lot of stuff downtown in Gaffney that same weekend. It's going to be a grand time. Any other questions?
Calvin's going to get back to the picture of we used to have it in Washington, that guy shooting the horse.
Oh yeah. So there's a couple of renditions of that. The William Rainey one is actually in the State House. No, we don't. No, it belongs in the State House. Where people that go to the State House can see this and they can ask that question. What is this all about? Oh, we have it. Yeah, we have a copy. We have a big wayside actually out on the Green River Road. When you go out and walk the Battlefield Trail, where it tells that story. There's a big wayside, probably this big.
Any other events coming up in the park?
Well, I told you about the one up at Mineral Museum on that weekend. I think it's the 15th, 16th, and 17th on the Bridge Parkway. September up in Sycamore Shoals, October 6th at Cowpens, October 7th at Kings Mountain. Always January 17th is that weekend of January 17th, whatever is the closest weekend, is the big event at Cowpens. We usually have a few thousand people there. Huge encampment with all the living historians and reenactors that are there, and sometimes we'll have well over 100 doing, musket demonstrations and drills, and, most of you guys camp out for the whole weekend. Some of you guys don't, some of you guys go home and pretend to everything. Roll up with sleeping pads, makes it look like sleeping.
And 96 also does candlelight tour.
96 candlelight tour. So I don't know if any of you know it or not, but there's this little thing that's happening on Monday. Right? At 96 is right, like, on the center line of the path of totality for the eclipse. And so they're slammed. They were taking reservations for that.
I heard clips of people are just parts of God at $50 a whack. People put tents in.
Oh, I would doubt it. I've seen people getting offers of $1,500 to rent out a room in their house. So, any of you need to make a few bucks, right? Airbnb, right? Just go on Airbnb. Hey, Eclipse. I got some Eclipse property.
We have 13 relatives
There you go.
at our house this weekend.
Nice.
You know what's going to happen? It's going to be rainy and cloudy and
Don't say that. Don't you say that. You don't know what we're going through up on the Blue Ridge Parkway with this, all right? I got 40 porta potties I ordered.
Actually, you're in better shape there. There's a front that's gone through that's how far pack rats bring the clock over.
You know what they say about predicting the weather, right?
Oh, yeah.
Only you guys
The job satisfaction they have is wrong, half the time and they're good.
We can't miss it. This is a great opportunity, so enjoy it. And we're your national parks. There's more. So we talked about there's 8 national parks in South Carolina now. Half of them are Revolutionary War parks, right? So you say you're going to a national park in South Carolina, there's a real good 50-50 chance that you're going to a Revolutionary War park in South Carolina. Most people don't even know it. So we have a lot of people show up at Cowpens. It's not uncommon, maybe once a week. So who won? The Confederate or the Northerners? And it's a great opportunity to kind of explain it. But that's the general gist. Any other questions, comments? Any more questions? That was a great question. Well, thank you all for letting me be here tonight. I do want to apologize for the last time. There was a mix-up, and it really wasn't until the very last second that I just realized that it couldn't happen. So I apologize for that if you were here waiting on the last time. And I'll buy you a shake or something sometime if you come to Calvin to one of the events. All right.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.